Hello, everyone. There is a popular opinion that it was Dorian who put an end to the era of aesthetes, and Ronnie Coleman supported him in this endeavor. In this issue, I will focus not only and not so much on Dorian's tournaments, his rivals and injuries, but rather on his inner growth, his mental attitude, and his character as a champion. Yates wasn't the only strong spirit, but Dorian's story and personality itself are absolutely unique. This issue is somewhat different from the others. Of course, I will focus on each of his 7 Olympia appearances, but I will pay much more attention to his psychology and mental growth from a daring novice to an undisputed leader who was eventually stopped only by injuries. You can tell a lot about your youth, where there were moves and the death of your father, and after your stepfather, 6 months in custody in a correctional center, after which he decided to change everything, a career in the rank of an amateur. It's all an interesting but still another story. Let's focus on Olympia. 91 years after the first pro tournament, the Night of Champions in '90, and the embarrassing defeat to aesthete Mohammed Benaziza, Dorian spent another year like a monk in the basement of the gym, completely alienated from the outside world. That offseason, he increased his dosages of drugs, which were still childish compared to current athletes, and this time he confidently took the Night of the Champion. With several months left before the Olympia, Yates continued to gain in size, preparing for a duel at that time with 7-time Mr. Olympia Lee Haney, but the real transformation was not even taking place in Dorian's body, but in his mind. The fact is that Lee Haney won his first Olympia title in 1984. Dorian had just started training a year earlier. That is, throughout his steady progress, he watched the greatness of Haney, who became a model and example for Yates. Dorian progressed quickly. Amateur tournaments were a thing of the past. The first defeat in the PRO status was followed by a victory. Dorian understood that he was on the right track, and also that Lee Haney often took titles being elementary more than his rivals. And now in the early 90s, the bodybuilder from Birmingham was ready to challenge the longtime leader. Next is the quote, "I've come a long way and finally figured it out. It looks like I can beat this guy." But I had to change my mentality from, wow, Lee Haney is Mr. Olympia, wow, to, no, no, no. He has 2 arms, 2 legs, he also presses iron, and I can guarantee one thing for sure. He doesn't train as hard as I do. He doesn't give his all to it the way I do. It was simply impossible to train, eat, and follow every detail more carefully than I did. With this realization came my inner strength. 7-time. Mr. Olympia. Can I really beat him? Why not? All this is just in the spirit of Dorian, who believes that everything comes from thoughts and each of us creates his own reality in which to live. Every Olympia started with the idea that he was capable of winning and the experience that proved that it was real. At his debut Yates Olympia, Haney looked decent in comparison. According to the protocols, he even won one of the rounds of comparisons, but still, Lee Haney won the 8th victory in a row. He flattered his competitors, saying that he saw him personally for the first time and was simply amazed by his broadest back muscles, which did postures in the back. Dorian's performances are truly monstrous, as well as his calf thighs and overall body composition. It was clear that Dorian just needed a little more time. The audience was already anticipating a rematch, but Haney decided to leave on a winning note and refused to participate. You can talk a lot about the motivation for his decision, but this does not change the essence. During the preparation, Yates learned that his main rival had finished his career and realized that in any case he would lead in terms of size and therefore focused on maximum quality. In the same year, he made adjustments to training, reduced the number of working approaches from 2 up to just 1, but really failed, which only accelerated the pace of his recovery. I doubled the dosage of GH and showed excellent form at the Olympia '92. Yes, the aesthetes and posing masters Ray, Labrada, and Levrone were good, but Yates was as tough externally as mentally and won his first victory at the main tournament in the bodybuilding world. By the way, few people know that in '92 Dorian could have entered the world of wrestling. Vince McMahon noted Yates' brutality and charisma at the Night of Champions, where he took 2nd place and offered him a contract that was very profitable for Dorian's income at that time. $150,000 a year, housing in the States, various bonuses, and all this for participating in wrestling events. He was paid for a first-class ticket to the United States, and Tom Platz himself met him at the airport. The prospects were huge. Dorian asked his wife for advice, but she said that he should make such a global decision himself, and he reasoned that at that stage it would be wrong to combine professional bodybuilding with anything else. The Mr. Olympia tournament was the most important thing for Dorian. He gave up money and possible fame and made a decision that he is confident of now many years later. He is, first of all, an athlete, not a showman, and since his heart chose sports, so be it. Dorian was basically an antagonist of stage shows, as well as photo shoots in which athletes were sprayed with water and oil and asked to fake hard workouts and rock up on beaches with girls and protein shakes in their hands. Yates, as always, had his own way and became one of the initiators of the trend of realism in bodybuilding. "It's not about us," he said. "We live differently." Dorian knew by himself that athletes don't chill out everywhere, like in the pictures in California. In most cases, in addition to training, they work hard, face everyday problems, and train in harsh halls with views not of the ocean coast but of frozen urban areas. His photo sets were realistic, often in clothes that took place right during training, and that's why they were so close and understandable to connoisseurs of real bodybuilding and not artificial faces from posters. One of Dorian's most famous photo shoots took place in the summer of '93 and was also as simple and natural as possible. Yates just undressed after training and began posing right in the gym in front of the photographer. Olympia was almost 2 months away, but Dorian was already cut and stiff like a stone statue, while remaining huge and weighing more than 122 kilos. He gained 13 kilograms from the last Olympia and was preparing to exhibit excellent quality. It was an unprecedented level. Dorian achieved a similar result, among other things, because he prepared according to the same scheme as a year earlier, but did not work as hard in the eyeliner process. As a result, the kilograms accumulated in a fruitful off-season reached the stage in the most severe conditions and produced an effect that you can see in the pictures and videos from the 1993 Olympia. Everyone witnessed the absolute dominance of the mass monster from Britain. After that, the rivals did not hide their emotions from the pictures published in magazines from that very photo shoot. Paul Dillett advised Lee Labrada and Sean Ray to go to the auditorium with a calm soul, and after what he saw, he realized that it was time to increase the dosages himself. Flex Wheeler just shook his head in silence. Paul DeMeo admitted that he had only come to terms with how good Dorian was in '92 as he became even better, and Mike Mentzer honestly stated that for the first time in his life he simply could not find the words to describe what he saw. It was a new level of bodybuilding, a new standard of mass and rigidity, which was forged in the basements of Birmingham. '93, in principle, became one of the favorite years of Dorian's career. According to the athlete, then injuries bypassed him and he could perform any exercises in his signature hardcore style, and he always wanted to work. Yates was one of the few who returned to training immediately after the Olympics. He didn't need to recharge. All his attention was on one goal: the ability to focus on the most important things without being distracted by other factors, and even more so by the opinions of others, became one of the fundamental traits of his character as a champion on stage and as a person in general. And everything would be fine, but since 1994, serious injuries began. First the shoulder, then the hip, and then the biceps during the barbell deadlift a few weeks before the Olympia. But Dorian showed resilience to difficulties, continued training, reducing the load on the damaged muscles as much as possible, and brought the form to Olympia. Kevin Levrone and Sean Ray were left behind again. Yates once again defended the title. The year is 1995. Kevin Levrone, as well as Nasser El Sonbadi, who ousted Sean Ray from the top three, competed against the consistently tough Dorian this time. But that year in Atlanta, Yates continued his winning streak. By the way, regular titles did not awaken thoughts in his head about chasing Haney's record. Quote, "I was just absorbed in the process, enjoying it, and realizing that this was something I was capable of and that I simply had to implement. But I remember well how in '96 everything somehow changed, turned more into work, and the old drive just disappeared. When Dorian talked about the need for constant improvement of an already seemingly dominant form, it can be understood. In 1996, Sean Ray and Nasser El Sonbati made a new leap in form. Everyone was fine, but Nasser was disqualified for failing a diuretic test, and Ray was placed second. Whether by inertia or not, Dorian became Mr. Olympia again. The previously quiet talk that the judges were just robbing other equally talented bodybuilders was getting louder, and finally the 97th year, the hardest in Dorian's career. After that, Yates openly stated that he had increased the dosages again during that training and added insulin to the drugs. But the shape didn't get any better. On the contrary, the muscles were not as tough and high quality in the end. Besides, the stomach bulged too much. And 3 weeks before the Olympia, things got worse than ever. He tore his triceps during one of his workouts. The pain in the triceps area has been bothering me all year, and now I understand that it was necessary to simply take a break, get checked out, understand what was wrong, and simply recover. But given my character and approach to training and the fact that I was the best, and every first one was just thinking about how to remove me from Olympia, 2 months for examination and rest seemed to me an unacceptable luxury. I continued training, applied ice after classes, sat on painkillers, did not pay attention to the obvious body signals, and eventually tore my triceps 3 weeks before the tournament. All this time, I practically did not train and could hardly work with weights. Only cardio and diet remained from the previous regime. It wasn't the best end to the training, but you can't really lose the fruits of 15 years of training in 3 weeks. So the form could have turned out. In fact, few people know about it. 3 days before the tournament, I still did not understand whether I would go on stage or not. Even the night before the Olympia, my physiotherapist was still removing the remaining fluids that had accumulated at the site of the former inflammation. It was the worst Olympia of my career, primarily because I didn't feel the same way before. Usually, after completing my training, I was very powerful and incredibly confident. People around me said that my energy was felt almost physically, but that year I was exhausted by the injury and the expectation of its outcome. I went on stage on painkillers and my triceps was basically 95% torn off. It was supported by some remnants of tissue and tendons. Every time I set another pose, I didn't think about how dominant I looked or not, but about whether my triceps would come off completely right now, whether I could reach the end. I was not myself. I couldn't pose with aggression and passion as usual. And yes, my main pursuer, Nasser, was probably in the best shape of his career. Many believed that he could have won. Anyway, that Olympia was the most difficult. There is already a video on the channel about Nasser's position, footage of the main duel in front of you. The 1997 Olympia is rightfully considered one of the most controversial in history. Nasser had every chance to win. For the first time, the tournament was held on Friday and Saturday, but the results announced on the final day allegedly turned out to be only Friday, and at the banquet, the 4th Lee Priest and the 5th Paul Dillett found out that they were shifted to a lower position in the protocol, and Kevin Levrone became the 4th, and Dorian won his 6th title. I'll continue with a quote from the champion. After the tournament, I underwent surgery, recovered, and returned to training, but I realized that everything was not the same, and I simply would not be able to return to my previous style of working with iron. First of all, this concerned bench presses, in which an imbalance of loads would inevitably form and it would lead to new injuries. I realized that I would not return to my former form and would lose, not because someone will be better, but because I won't be able to show my best. I suddenly realized that that was it. It's a pity that we didn't see Dorian on the stage of Olympia '98, with Ronnie on the rise, and it's a pity that it was the injuries that forced him to leave the stage. I would like to end with one more quote from Yates. Many people say that I trained too hard, was out of my mind, and therefore got injured. My answer is that I trained wisely, but at the same time with passion. I was constantly on the edge of exploring the limits of my abilities. I didn't understand how easy it was to be content with what I had achieved, and this form would be enough for new victories. If I'm going to go on stage, I have to give my all in the audience, that is, reach the limit. And if you don't go beyond your limit, how will you know what it is? I appreciate your support. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications when new videos are released. And as always, thanks for watching. Sports Guru was with you. See you later.